Near Jericho, on the open ground between the camp and the city walls, a man stood with a drawn sword. Joshua saw him and walked toward him. The question came out hard and direct. Are you for us or for our adversaries? The answer was not what he expected. No, but as commander of the army of the Lord, I have now come. Joshua fell face down on the earth. He was on holy ground and he knew it. The drawn sword did not belong to Israel. It did not belong to Canaan. It belonged to something older and larger than the war Joshua was about to fight. And the encounter stripped away any easy assumption that God was simply a national deity marching at the head of one people's army. The Lord had his own purposes. Joshua was being told, in the most physical way possible, that the coming conquest was not merely Israel's project. It was something more sobering, more weighty, and far less predictable than territory. But to understand why Joshua stood on that plain, why a drawn sword hung in the air above him, and why an entire nation waited behind him on the wrong side of a river, you have to go back not far, just 30 days. You have to go back to the moment the only leader Israel had ever known drew his last breath on a mountain he could see the promise from, but never enter. Moses was dead. He had led Israel out of Egypt, through the sea, into the desert, and through 40 years of wandering that wore down an entire generation. He had received the law on Sinai. He had spoken with God face to face. And then, on the plains of Moab, he had climbed Mount Nebo, looked out over the land God had promised to Abraham centuries before, and died. The text says God buried him, and that no one knows his grave to this day. There was no monument, no shrine, just absence, and the land waiting on the other side of the Jordan. The people mourned 30 days. Then the mourning ended, and Joshua son of Nun had to move. He was not a young man taking the stage for the first time. He had been Moses' assistant since his youth. He had been one of the 12 spies sent into Canaan decades earlier, and one of only 2 who came back believing the land could be taken. He had stood inside the tent of meeting when Moses went in to speak with God, and he had stayed behind even when Moses left. He knew the presence of the Lord. He had seen what happened when a nation trusted and when it did not. But knowing the presence and carrying the weight of leadership are different things. And now the weight was entirely on him. God spoke to him directly. The words are recorded in the opening chapter of the book that bears his name. Moses, my servant, is dead. Now then, arise, go over the Jordan, you and all this people, into the land that I am giving to them. The promise was specific. Every place the sole of their foot would tread, God said he was giving to Israel. The boundaries reached from the wilderness to Lebanon, from the Euphrates to the Great Sea. This was not a vague aspiration. It was an inheritance spoken as if the deed had already been signed. Then came the instruction that would define everything. Be strong and courageous. Not once, 3 times in the same passage. Be strong and courageous, for you shall cause this people to inherit the land. Be strong and very courageous, being careful to do according to all the law that Moses my servant commanded you. Be strong and courageous. Do not be frightened, and do not be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. The repetition is not decoration. Reveals what God saw in Joshua, and perhaps what God knew Joshua needed to hear. The task ahead was enormous. Israel was not an army of seasoned imperial conquerors. They were former slaves and desert wanderers, carrying children and flocks, about to cross a river in flood season and enter a land organized into fortified city-states with armies, chariots, and alliances. The courage God asked for was not bravado. It was the resolve to keep moving when every reasonable calculation said the odds were against them. Joshua's first order was practical. He told the officers to go through the camp and prepare provisions, because within 3 days they would cross the Jordan to take possession of the land. He addressed the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, the groups who had already received their inheritance east of the Jordan from Moses. He reminded them of their promise. Their wives and children and livestock could stay in the cities Moses had given them, but their fighting men had to cross over armed ahead of their fellow Israelites and not return until the conquest was done. They answered without hesitation, "All that you have commanded us we will do, and wherever you send us we will go. Only be strong and courageous." The response echoed God's own words back to Joshua. The people were ready. The camp was in motion, and somewhere on the plain ahead, a man with a drawn sword was already waiting. Chapter 2. 2 men in a harlot's house. Joshua sent 2 men from Shittim. He told them to go and spy out the land, especially Jerith-Mission. Not 12 spies this time, as Moses had sent a generation before, that had ended in panic and 40 years of punishment. 2 men, no names given, no recorded briefing beyond the destination. The simplicity suggests Joshua wanted information, not spectacle. He needed to understand what they were walking into. Jericho sat in the Jordan Valley, roughly 5 miles west of the river, and about 20 miles northeast of Jerusalem. It was not a large city by the standards of the great empires, but it was old. The settlement at Jericho is among the most ancient continuously occupied sites in the world, with evidence of human habitation reaching back thousands of years before Israel existed. By the time the spies arrived, it was a fortified town with walls, positioned near a spring that made the surrounding land fertile. It guarded the approach into the central hill country. If Israel was going to enter Canaan from the east, Jericho was the first door. The 2 men entered the city and went to the house of a woman named Rahab. The text identifies her as a prostitute. In the culture of the ancient Near East, prostitutes often operated near city gates and taverns, and their homes served as places where travelers could find lodging without drawing much attention. For 2 strangers entering a fortified Canaanite city, the house of a prostitute offered a place to stay, to listen, and to observe without being immediately questioned. But someone noticed. The king of Jericho was told, "Behold, men from the people of Israel have come here tonight to search out the land." The king sent word to Rahab, "Bring out the men who came to you." What Rahab did next is one of the most theologically loaded acts in the entire book. She hid the spies. She told the king's messengers that the men had come, but that they had left at dusk before the gate was shut, and that if the king's men pursued quickly, they might catch them. The pursuers left. The road to the Jordan was searched. The gate was shut behind them. Inside the house, the 2 Israelites were hidden on the roof under stalks of flax that Rahab had laid out there. She came up to them after the pursuers had gone and spoke. What she said is remarkable. She did not bargain from a position of ignorance. She spoke from what she already knew, and what she knew was extraordinary. "I know that the Lord has given you the land. The fear of you has fallen upon us. All the inhabitants of the land melt away before you. For we have heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea before you when you came out of Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites, Sihon and Og, whom you devoted to destruction. And as soon as we heard it, our hearts melted, and there was no spirit left in any man because of you. For the Lord your God, He is God in the heavens above and on the earth beneath." This is not the speech of a woman protecting herself from an occupying force. This is a confession. Rahab had heard the reports of what God had done for Israel, and she had drawn a conclusion the rest of Jericho had not. She recognized the Lord as God, not just Israel's God, but God over heaven and earth. In a city that would soon be devoted to destruction, one woman saw clearly what the king and the soldiers and the priests of Canaan could not, or would not. Then she made her request. "Now then, please swear to me by the Lord, since I have dealt kindly with you, that you also will deal kindly with my father's house, and give me a sure sign that you will save alive my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all who belong to them, and deliver our lives from death." The men answered, "Our life for yours, even to death. If you do not tell this business of ours, Then when the Lord gives us the land, we will deal kindly and faithfully with you." Rahab let them down by a rope through the window, because her house was built into the city wall itself. Before they left, she gave them one instruction. "Go to the hill country," she said, "so the pursuers do not find you. Hide there for 3 days until the men return. Then you can go your way." The men gave her a sign in return, a scarlet cord. She was to tie it in the same window she had let them down from. When Israel came to take the city, anyone found inside that house would be spared. If anyone went out into the street and was killed, the blood would be on their own head. But if a hand was laid on anyone inside the house with the cord, the spies would bear the guilt. The cord was her guarantee. She tied it that day. The men went into the hill country and stayed 3 days. The pursuers searched the road but found nothing. When it was safe, the 2 spies came down from the mountains, crossed back over the Jordan, and came to Joshua, son of Nun. They told him everything that had happened, and they said, "Truly the Lord has given all the land into our hands, and also all the inhabitants of the land melt away because of us." The report was not just military intelligence, it was confirmation. The same fear Rahab described, hearts melting, courage gone, was already working through Canaan. The battle had begun before a single wall was touched. Chapter 3. The river stops 3 days after the spies returned. The officers went through the camp and gave the order. "When you see the Ark of the Covenant of the Lord your God being carried by the Levitical priests, set out from your place and follow it. But keep a distance of about 2,000 cubits, roughly 3,000 feet, between you and the Ark. Do not come near it." The purpose was practical and theological. The distance ensured the whole nation could see the Ark clearly, and it preserved the awareness that the Ark was holy, not a common object to be crowded or touched casually. The Ark of the Covenant was the most sacred object Israel possessed. It was a chest overlaid with gold containing the stone tablets of the law, a jar of manna, and Aaron's staff. It represented the throne of God's presence among his people. Where the Ark went, the Lord led. In the wilderness, a cloud had guided them by day and fire by night. Now the Ark would lead them across the river and into the land. The symbol was deliberate. God was not staying behind. His presence was going ahead of them into Canaan. Joshua told the people to consecrate themselves. "Tomorrow," he said, "the Lord will do wonders among you." The Jordan was at flood stage. This detail matters. In the spring, when the harvest season began, the Jordan swelled with runoff from the Lebanon mountains and filled its banks far beyond the dry season channel. Crossing at flood stage with women, children, elderly, and livestock was not a simple ford. It was dangerous. The timing was not something Joshua chose for tactical advantage. It was the time they were in, and the difficulty of it meant that whatever happened at the river would be unmistakably beyond ordinary effort. The next morning, the priests lifted the ark and stepped toward the Jordan. The people followed at the prescribed distance. Joshua had been told by God that when the priests reached the edge of the water, the river would stop. The waters flowing from upstream would pile up in a heap, and the people would cross on dry ground. This is what happened. As soon as the priests' feet touched the water's edge, the flow from above was cut off. The water stood in a heap far upstream, near a town called Adam, beside Zarethan. The water flowing down to the Salt Sea was cut off entirely, and the people crossed over opposite Jericho on ground that was dry. The priests who carried the ark stood in the middle of the riverbed on dry ground, while all Israel passed by. The text does not rush past the image, it holds it. Priests standing in the middle of a riverbed that should have been deep, fast, and lethal, holding the ark while an entire nation walked past them. The crossing was not instantaneous, it took time. Hundreds of thousands of people, with animals and carts and belongings, moving across a river floor that had been water minutes before. Joshua had been given another instruction. 12 men, one from each tribe, were to take up 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan. from the place where the priests' feet stood, and carry them to the camp on the other side. Joshua also set up 12 stones in the middle of the Jordan itself, where the priests had stood. The stones taken out were laid at Gilgal, where Israel camped that first night in the Promised Land. The purpose was memory. When your children ask in time to come, "What do these stones mean?" then you shall tell them that the waters of the Jordan were cut off before the ark of the covenant of the Lord. When it passed over the Jordan, the waters were cut off, so these stones shall be to the people of Israel a memorial forever. Memory is a recurring force in this book. Stones do not speak, but they hold a moment in place. Long after the river returned, and the riverbed vanished under water again, the stones at Gilgal would sit in the open air, and a father would have to tell his son what happened there. The covenant was not built on forgetting. It was built on remembering what God had done and acting accordingly. On the 10th day of the first month, the people came up out of the Jordan and camped at Gilgal on the east border of Jericho. The date is precise and it carries weight. It was the same time of year, the 10th day of the first month, when Israel in Egypt had selected the Passover lamb 4 days before the Exodus. Now, on the same calendar day, they stood in the land. The symmetry was not accidental. At Gilgal, Joshua did something that cut to the heart of Israel's identity. He circumcised every male who had been born in the wilderness during the 40 years of wandering. The generation that came out of Egypt had been circumcised, but they had died in the desert because of their disobedience at the report of the spies. Their children, the generation now standing in the Promised Land, had not been circumcised on the journey. The rite had lapsed. Joshua performed it at Gilgal, and the place was named after what it meant. The Lord said, "Today I have rolled away the reproach of Egypt from you." Gilgal sounds like the Hebrew word for to roll. The men stayed in the camp until they were healed. Then Israel kept the Passover on the 14th day of the month, on the plains of Jericho. They ate the produce of the land, unleavened bread and roasted grain. And the day after the Passover, the manna stopped. It had fallen every morning for 40 years, through every stage of the wilderness journey. Now, in the land it ceased. They ate the food of Canaan from that day forward. The wilderness was over. The promise was under their feet. And the first city stood less than 2,000 yards away. Chapter 4. 7 days of silence. Jericho was shut up tight. The king had seen what was coming. The gates were barred. No one went out. No one came in. The city sat behind its walls and waited, because in the ancient Near East, a fortified city under siege could hold out for months if it had water and food. Jericho had the spring. It had stores. It had walls that had stood for generations. The strategy of a besieged city was simple. Stay inside. Let the attackers exhaust themselves. Wait them out. God told Joshua the battle plan, and it was unlike anything a military commander would devise. March around the city with all the fighting men. Go around once. Do this for 6 days. 7 priests shall carry 7 trumpets of ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing the trumpets. When they make a long blast, all the people shall shout with a great shout, and the wall of the city will fall down flat. No siege engines, no battering rams, no ladders, scaling parties, no negotiation, just walking silence. And the sound of ram's horns. The plan was not only unusual, it was humiliating by the standards of ancient warfare. A great host of fighting men, circling a city in single file once a day, while the people inside watched from the walls. The defenders of Jericho could see everything. They could count the soldiers. They could observe the ark. They could hear the horns. And they could not understand what was happening, because nothing in their military experience told them that walking in circles would bring a wall down. Joshua obeyed. He rose early in the morning, and the priests took up the ark. 7 priests carried 7 ram's horns before the ark. The armed men went ahead. The rear guard followed the ark. The trumpets blew continually. But Joshua had commanded the people, "You shall not shout or make your voice heard, neither shall any word go out of your mouth, until the day I tell you to shout. Then you shall shout." Silence. Imagine the discipline required. An entire army, thousands strong, walking around a hostile city in formation, and no one speaks, no war cries, no taunts at the walls, no soldiers calling to one another. Just the crunch of feet on the road, the bleat of rams' horns, and the sound of the wind. The people inside Jericho saw the army come, circle once, and return to camp. Day 1 ended. Nothing happened. Day 2, the same. Day 3, Day 4, Day 5. Each morning the army rose, formed up, walked around the city once, and went back. The priests blew the horns. The ark went with them. No wall moved, no stone fell, no crack appeared. The city stayed shut. Whatever the defenders of Jericho felt on the first day, perhaps confusion, perhaps amusement, perhaps unease, by the 5th and 6th day it must have been something close to dread. The same army, the same horns, the same silent circling. Day after day, whatever this was, it was not a siege they understood. It was a ritual, and rituals have a destination. The 7th day came. They rose at dawn, and this time they marched around the city 7 times. The same formation, the same horns, the same silence from the people. 7 circuits. The pace must have been relentless. The entire army walking 7 full laps around Jericho in a single day, the horns never stopping, the tension building with every pass. On the 7th circuit, the priests blew a long blast. Joshua spoke. "Shout, for the Lord has given you the city." The people shouted. The wall fell down flat. The text does not describe the mechanics. It does not say the wall crumbled section by section, or that the gates burst. It says the wall fell down flat, and the people went up into the city, every man straight before him. They took the city. The instruction had been absolute. The city and everything in it was devoted to the Lord for destruction. This was the principle of the ban, known in the Hebrew text as Herem. In the theology of the conquest, certain cities and their contents were not to be plundered or kept. They were devoted entirely to God. The silver and gold and vessels of bronze and iron were to go into the treasury of the Lord. Everything else, every living thing, was to be destroyed. The ban was not a policy of economic exploitation. It was an act of total dedication, an acknowledgement that the victory belonged entirely to God, and that Israel had no right to take what had been consecrated. Joshua had given a warning. "Keep yourselves from the things devoted to destruction, lest you covet them and take some of the devoted things, and make the camp of Israel a thing for destruction, and bring trouble upon it." The warning would prove necessary, but not yet. The city was burned. Only Rahab and her household were spared. The 2 spies went in and brought her out, her parents, her brothers, and all who belonged to her, and they were set outside the camp of Israel. Later they were given a place among the people. The scarlet cord in the window had held its promise. Joshua laid an oath on the city itself. "Cursed before the Lord be the man who rises up and rebuilds this city, Jericho. At the cost of his firstborn shall he lay its foundation, and at the cost of his youngest son shall he set up its gates." The curse was specific, and it would echo forward through Israel's history. Centuries later, during the reign of Ahab, a man named Hiel of Bethel would rebuild Jericho. The text records that he laid the foundation at the cost of Abiram, his firstborn, and set up the gates at the cost of Segub, his youngest. The words of Joshua outlived the man who spoke them. Jericho was the firstfruits. The door was open, but the war was just beginning. Chapter 5. The hidden Sinai was a small city. After Jericho, it must have looked manageable. It sat about 3,000 feet above the Jordan Valley, roughly 12 miles west of Jericho, in the hill country near Bethel. The name means the ruin, and the site may have carried that name because it had been abandoned and resettled at various points. It was not a royal fortress. It was a modest town with a modest population. Joshua sent men to spy it out. They went up from Jericho to Ai, looked it over, and came back with a confident report. Do not have all the people go up. Let about 2,000 or 3,000 men go up and attack Ai. Do not make the whole people toil, for they are few. The advice was reasonable. Jericho had been a major operation. Ai was not. Why exhaust the entire army for a place that could be handled by a fraction of the force? Joshua sent about 3,000 men. They went up to Ai, and they were routed. The men of Ai killed about 36 of them and chased them from the gate as far as Shebarim, striking them on the way down. The hearts of the people melted and became as water, 36 dead. Not a catastrophic number by the standards of ancient warfare, but the effect was devastating. This was the first engagement after Jericho, the first time Israel met resistance and lost. They had been told the land was being given to them. They had walked through the Jordan on dry ground. Walls had fallen without a siege engine. And now, at a small hill town, they fled with men lying dead on the slope. The psychological collapse was immediate. The same language used of the Canaanites, hearts melting, was now used of Israel. Joshua tore his clothes. He and the elders of Israel fell on their faces before the ark of the Lord until evening. They put dust on their heads. Joshua cried out to God, "Alas, O Lord God, why have you brought this people over the Jordan at all, to give us into the hands of the Amorites, to destroy us? Would that we had been content to dwell beyond the Jordan. O Lord, what can I say? When Israel has turned their backs to their enemies." The prayer was raw. It echoed the kind of complaint Moses had heard in the wilderness, the people wishing they had never left, fearing annihilation. Joshua was afraid, not of Ai. He was afraid that the promise had already begun to unravel. God answered, and the answer cut through the grief like a blade. "Get up. Why have you fallen on your face? Israel has sinned. They have transgressed my covenant that I commanded them. They have taken some of the devoted things. They have stolen and lied and put them among their own belongings. Therefore the people of Israel cannot stand before their enemies. They turn their backs before their enemies, because they have become devoted for destruction. I will be with you no more, unless you destroy the devoted things from among you." The defeat at Ai was not a military failure. It was a covenant failure. Someone had taken what belonged to God. The ban on Jericho had been violated. The silver, the gold, the garments, something that was consecrated to destruction, had been secretly kept, hidden inside the camp of Israel. And because the covenant community was not a collection of isolated individuals, but a single body under one covenant, the sin of one man had brought guilt on the whole nation. In the ancient Near Eastern understanding, and in Israel's theology specifically, the community carried the consequences of what any member did. This was not a modern individualist framework. It was a world where identity was collective, where one man's act could open a breach that the enemy walked through. God gave instructions: sanctify the people. Tomorrow, tribe by tribe, the tribes would pass before the Lord. The tribe the Lord took would come forward by clans. The clan would come forward by households. The household would come forward man by man. And the man who was taken with the devoted things would be burned with fire, he and all that he had, because he had transgressed the covenant and done a disgraceful thing in Israel. The process was deliberate. It narrowed. Tribes, then clans, then families, then one man. The casting of lots, a common method in the ancient world for discerning divine will, would identify the guilty party. It was not a trial with witnesses. It was an act of divine exposure. The next morning, the process began. Clan by clan, family by family, man by man, the lot fell on Achan son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, of the tribe of Judah. Joshua spoke to Achan directly. "My son, give glory to the Lord God of Israel, and give praise to him. Tell me now what you have done. Do not hide it from me." Achan confessed, "It is true. I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, and this is what I did. When I saw among the spoil a beautiful cloak from Shinar, and 200 shekels of silver, and a bar of gold weighing 50 shekels, then I coveted them and took them. and see, they are hidden in the ground inside my tent, with the silver underneath. The confession is spare but revealing. He saw, he coveted, he took, he hid. The sequence is as old as human desire itself. The eyes found beauty. The heart wanted what it had no right to. The hand reached. And then the covering, the attempt to bury what could not be justified, to keep it in darkness where no one would know. The cloak from Shinar was likely a fine imported garment from Mesopotamia, the kind of thing a person might keep as a treasure. The silver and gold together were a significant amount. Achan was not starving. He was not desperate. He saw something beautiful and valuable, and he wanted it. Even though God had said it was not his to take, messengers ran to the tent. The items were there, hidden in the ground, the silver underneath. They brought them out and laid them before the Lord. Achan and his sons and daughters, his oxen, donkeys, and sheep, his tent, and all his possessions were brought to the valley of Achor. The place name means trouble, and it would carry that meaning forward in Israel's memory. Joshua said, "Why did you bring trouble on us? The Lord brings trouble on you today." All Israel stoned him with stones. They burned them with fire and heaped stones over them. The valley kept the name. The devoted things were removed. The breach was closed. Then God spoke to Joshua again. "Do not fear and do not be dismayed. Take all the fighting men with you, and arise, go up to Ai. See, I have given into your hand the king of Ai, and his people, his city and his land." This time the approach was different. Joshua chose 30,000 of his best warriors and sent them out by night to position an ambush west of Ai, between Bethel and Ai. The main force would approach the city from the front, as before. When the men of Ai came out to fight, the main force would feign retreat, drawing the defenders away from the city. Then the ambush force would rise, enter the undefended city, and set it on fire. The plan worked. Joshua and the main body approached. The king of Ai saw them and led his men out as he had done before. Israel retreated. The defenders pursued, drawn away from the city. The signal went up. Joshua stretched out the javelin in his hand toward Ai, and the ambush force entered the city and set it ablaze. The men of Ai looked back and saw smoke rising from their own walls. They had nowhere to go. Israel turned and fought. The city fell. The king of Ai was taken alive, brought to Joshua, and hanged on a tree until evening. His body was taken down at sunset, in keeping with the law's instruction that a hanged man must not remain overnight, and it was thrown at the entrance of the city gate, where a great heap of stones was raised over it. Joshua built an altar to the Lord on Mount Ebal of unhewn stones, as Moses had commanded. He wrote on the stones a copy of the law of Moses. Then all Israel, with elders, officers, and judges, stood on opposite sides of the ark, half in front of Mount Gerizim and half in front of Mount Ebal. And the blessings and curses of the law were read aloud, every word, as Moses had instructed before his death. The ceremony at Ebal was not a celebration of victory. It was a renewal of obligation. Israel had tasted what happened when the covenant was broken. Now in the shadow of two conquered cities, they stood between two mountains and heard again what it meant to belong to the Lord. Blessing and curse, life and death. The words were spoken in the open air, and the land heard them. Chapter 6. The day the sun held. The news traveled fast. Jericho was destroyed. Ai was burned. The Israelites were moving through the central hill country, and the Canaanite city-states understood what was coming. The response was not submission, it was alliance. The kings of the hill country and the lowlands, the kings of the coast and the interior, began to gather. They coordinated, they prepared. But one group took a different approach, and that decision would shape the next phase of the war. The people of Gibeon acted alone. Gibeon was a significant city. The text later calls it a great city, greater than Ai, with men who were warriors. It sat in the central highlands, about 6 miles northwest of Jerusalem. The Gibeonites understood that direct confrontation would end the way Jericho and Ai had ended. So they chose deception. They took worn-out sacks for their donkeys, old wineskins, cracked and mended, sandals with holes, clothes patched and threadbare. They took dry and moldy bread. They came to Joshua at the camp at Gilgal and said, "We have come from a far country. Make a covenant with us." The story they told was careful. "Your servants have come from a very far country because of the name of the Lord, your God. We have heard a report of him and of all he did in Egypt and what he did to the 2 kings of the Amorites beyond the Jordan. So our elders and the inhabitants of our country said to us, 'Take provisions in your hand for the journey and go to meet them and say, "We are your servants. Make a covenant with us. Look at our bread. It was warm from the oven when we left home, and now it is dry and crumbled. These wineskins were new when we filled them, and now they are torn. Our clothes and sandals are worn out from the very long journey." The Israelites examined the evidence. The moldy bread, the cracked wineskins, the ragged clothes. It looked convincing. The men of Israel sampled their provisions. They did not ask direction from the Lord. The text states this plainly, and it stands as one of the most quietly devastating sentences in the book. Joshua made peace with them. He made a covenant to let them live. The leaders of the congregation swore an oath to them by the Lord. 3 days later, Israel discovered the truth. The Gibeonites were not from a far country. They were neighbors. They were Canaanites, the very people Israel had been commanded not to spare. The congregation grumbled against the leaders, but the leaders held to the oath. "We have sworn to them by the Lord, the God of Israel, and now we may not touch them." An oath made before God could not be broken, even when it had been obtained by fraud. The integrity of the word mattered more than the advantage of the moment. This is a theme that runs deep in Israel's covenant theology. God keeps his word. Israel must keep theirs even when the word was given to liars. Joshua summoned the Gibeonites and confronted them. "Why did you deceive us, saying, 'We are very far from you when you dwell among us'?" He pronounced judgment. They would live, but they would be woodcutters and water carriers for the house of God. The Gibeonites accepted the sentence. They explained their reasoning with the same theological clarity Rahab had shown. "Because it was told to your servants for a certainty that the Lord your God had commanded his servant Moses to give you all the land and to destroy all the inhabitants of the land before you. So we feared greatly for our lives because of you and did this thing. And now, behold, we are in your hand. Whatever seems good and right in your sight to do to us, do it." They recognized the same reality Rahab had. The Lord had given Israel the land. Their fear was not merely political, it was theological. They believed what God had said, and they acted on that belief, not with Rahab's directness, but with the strategy of survival available to them. But the covenant with Gibeon had consequences Israel did not anticipate. When the surrounding kings heard that Gibeon had made peace with Israel, they saw it as betrayal. Gibeon was a significant city. Its defection threatened the defensive structure of the whole region. Adoni-Zedek, king of Jerusalem, sent word to 4 other kings, Hoham of Hebron, Piram, Japhi of Lachish, and Debir of Eglon, 5 kings. They gathered their armies and attacked Gibeon. The Gibeonites sent word to Joshua at Gilgal, "Do not relax your hand from your servants. Come up to us quickly and save us and help us, for all the kings of the Amorites who dwell in the hill country are gathered against us." Joshua had sworn to protect them. Now the oath was being tested. He marched all night from Gilgal. The distance was significant, roughly 20 miles uphill, through difficult terrain at speed. The march itself was an act of covenant faithfulness. He did not wait for morning. He did not deliberate. He went. God spoke encouragement as the army moved. "Do not fear them, for I have given them into your hands. Not one of them shall stand before you." The battle came at Gibeon. Israel attacked, and the Lord threw the 5 kings into panic. As the Canaanite forces fled down the pass of Beth Horon, God sent great stones from the sky, hailstones. The text says that more died from the hailstones than the Israelites killed with the sword. The scale of the rout was overwhelming. It was during this pursuit that the most discussed event in the book of Joshua occurred. Joshua prayed. Standing in the open with the enemy fleeing and the light fading, he spoke to the Lord in the presence of all Israel. Sun, stand still at Gibeon, and moon, in the valley of Aijalon. The text records what happened next with a directness that has invited centuries of debate. And the sun stood still, and the moon stopped, until the nation took vengeance on their adversaries. The sun stopped in the midst of heaven and did not hurry to set for about a whole day. Interpretations of this passage vary widely. Some set as a literal suspension of cosmic movement. Others see poetic language, common in ancient Near Eastern battle accounts, where celestial language describes the sense that time itself had bent to allow a victory. Some scholars note that the text itself says the sun did not hurry to set, language that could describe an unusually long period of daylight. The honest position is that the text presents something extraordinary happening in the sky during a battle, and that the writer understood it as divine intervention in the natural order. The point of the passage is not to resolve astrophysics. It is to say that on that day, the Lord fought for Israel, and the pursuit did not end until the enemy was broken. The 5 kings hid in a cave at Makkedah, Joshua was told. He ordered great stones rolled against the mouth of the cave, and a guard posted. "Open the mouth of the cave," he said, "and bring those 5 kings out to me." They were brought out. Joshua called the commanders of Israel to place their feet on the necks of the kings, a gesture of total dominance common in ancient Near Eastern victory rituals. Then Joshua struck them and killed them, and hung them on 5 trees until evening. At sunset, the bodies were taken down, thrown into the cave where they had hidden, and stones heaped over them. The southern campaign rolled forward from there. Makkedah fell, Libnah fell, Lach, Hebron fell, Debir fell, the hill country, the Negev, the lowlands, and the slopes, all of it. Joshua struck the whole land, the hill country and the Negev and the lowlands and the springs, leaving none remaining. He devoted everything that breathed to destruction, as the Lord God of Israel commanded. Then Joshua returned, and all Israel with him, to the camp at Gilgal. The southern campaign was over, but in the north, a greater threat was assembling. Chapter 7, Fire in the North. When Jabin, king of Hazor, heard what had happened, he sent word to the kings of the north. Hazor was different from the cities of the south. It was the dominant city-state in northern Canaan, situated on a major trade route near the waters of Merom, and it had been a significant center of power for centuries. The archaeological record at Hazor shows a large, well-fortified city with impressive public buildings, and it had likely served as the head of a regional coalition before. Jabin was not a minor chieftain rallying a few towns. He was a king with the political weight to bring the entire north together, and he did. The kings of Madon, Shimron, Akshaph, the kings of the northern hill country, the Arabah south of Chinnereth, the lowlands, the heights of Dor on the west, the Canaanites of the east and west, the Amorites, the Hittites, the Perizzites, the Jebusites in the hill country, and the Hivites at the foot of Hermon. They came out with all their armies. The text says their number was like the sand on the seashore in multitude. They had horses and chariots, many of them. They encamped at the waters of Merom to fight against Israel. This was the largest force Israel had faced. The southern campaign had been fought against coalitions of city-states. This was a regional mobilization, and it included chariots, the most fearsome military technology of the late Bronze Age. In open terrain, chariots were devastating. They could break infantry lines, outflank foot soldiers, and run down fleeing men. Israel had no chariots. They had never fought against a chariot army. The numerical and technological gap was real, and Joshua had to know it. God spoke, "Do not be afraid of them, for tomorrow at this time I will give over all of them, slain, to Israel, "You shall hamstring their horses and burn their chariots with fire." The instruction was specific and it carried theological weight. Horses and chariots represented military power, and in the ancient world, kings measured their strength in these terms. Egypt's power rested on chariots. The Canaanite city-states relied on them. God was telling Israel not to capture these weapons and add them to their own arsenal, but to destroy them. The message was clear. Israel's security was not to rest on the same instruments that other nations trusted. The victory would come from the Lord, and the proof of that was the destruction of the very things that made the enemy strong. Joshua came upon them suddenly. The text does not describe the approach in detail, but the surprise element was decisive. A massive army encamped at Merom, confident in its numbers, was caught off guard. Israel struck. The Lord gave them into Israel's hand. They were routed. Joshua pursued them as far as Great Sidon and Misrephoth-maim, and eastward to the valley of Mizpeh. Not one of them was left. The army that had been like sand on the seashore was shattered in a single engagement. Joshua did what God had commanded. He hamstrung their horses and burned their chariots. Then he turned back and took Hazor. He struck its king with the sword. Hazor had been the head of all those kingdoms. Joshua burned the city itself. He devoted every person in it to destruction. He left none breathing. The other cities on their mounds were not burned. Israel took the spoil and the livestock as plunder, but Hazor was set on fire. The destruction of the leader city was total and deliberate. It was a signal. The coalition was finished. The text summarizes the campaign with a wide lens. So Joshua took all that land, the hill country, and all the Negev, and all the land of Goshen, and the lowland, and the Arabah, and the hill country of Israel and its lowland, from Mount Halak, which rises towards Seir, as far as Baal-gad in the valley of Lebanon below Mount Hermon. The sweep is enormous. From the southern deserts to the northern mountains, the major coalition armies had been broken, their kings killed, their strongholds taken. But then the text does something honest, something that a simpler conquest narrative would not do. It says what was not finished. The land was not entirely cleared. The Anakim, the people whose size and reputation had terrified the first generation of spies decades before, were driven out of the hill country, from Hebron, from Debir, from Anab, but they remained in Gaza, in Gath, and in Ashdod. Along the coast and in pockets of the lowlands, Canaanite populations survived. Some of the tribes that would receive their inheritances in the coming chapters would not be able to fully displace the peoples living in their allotted territories. The Jebusites remained in Jerusalem. The Canaanites remained in Gezer. Various groups persisted in the hill country and the valleys, sometimes becoming forced labor, sometimes holding their own enclaves. This tension between what God promised and what Israel actually possessed is one of the most important realities in the book of Joshua. The text does not pretend the conquest was total in a demographic sense. It presents a real military campaign with real successes and real limits. The coalition armies were broken, the major kings were killed, the strategic holds were taken. But the land was not emptied. The occupation was incomplete. And that incompleteness would become one of the defining problems of the next era in Israel's history. When the book of Judges opens on a people still surrounded by the cultures they were supposed to have displaced, Joshua had waged war for a long time. The text says he made war a long time with all those kings. This was not a single lightning campaign. It was years of fighting, negotiation, movement, and consolidation. The land was subdued, but it was not sterile. The promise was being fulfilled, but the fulfillment was partial, and the parts that remained would test Israel's faithfulness for generations. Chapter 8. The land divided. The fighting did not stop all at once. The land was subdued, but it was not empty. And now an old man stood before the assembly of Israel to receive what had been promised to him 45 years earlier. Caleb, son of Jephunneh, was 85 years old. He was one of the 2 spies, along with Joshua, who had brought back a faithful report from Canaan when the other 10 had spread fear